This is Nathan Fantasy Football League Updates. Today, we get you the latest recaps on the Fantasy Football League updates from Week 2 results and get you my Week 3 predictions as teams try to navigate a big set of injuries. All that and more next. Nathan, Fantasy Football League updates. We are back. We have some more predictions and more recaps after week 2 is in the books. And boy, was it a interesting week to say the least. We had some teams improve to 2-0, some shocking 0-2 falls, and some teams that got bounce back games or disappointing week 2 games, and most importantly, way too many injuries. We're going to cover all of that in my week 2 recap and get you our week 3 predictions. But without further ado, let's recap week 2. And as always, we start where we ended last time with the last game we called. It's the Michigan Avengers taking on the Zest Meisters. And before we get to that, I was a perfect 5-0 this week predicting games. I got all 5 correct. So that's a good rebound for me. And yeah, so let's get into the week 2 recap. Avengers, Zestmeisters. Let me tell you something. It was miles closer than we all thought it would be. In a 1-point win, the Michigan Avengers squeak by the Zestmeisters 141.64 to 140.12. And let me tell you, this one falls on the Zestmeisters because we'll start with the Avengers. They get a really solid game from the running back duo of Breece Hall, 24 fantasy points, and Jahmyr Gibbs, 17. Patrick Mahomes continues to disappoint with only 12 fantasy points. And Mark Andrews had a better game. He had 9. DK Metcalf shone bright with 28 fantasy points, and then Brandon Aubrey continues to be a cheat code with 17. -1 coming from the Cowboys defense, not ideal. The big misses off the bench for the Avengers was the 17-point game from Zach Charbonnet and technically the 15-point performance from newly acquired Aaron Rodgers. On the other side, though, the Zestmeisters, they play one of the best teams in the league to their max. Lamar scores 16, 17 for Kirk O'Chains, 17 for Jordan Mason, 20 for George Kittle. Here's where the problem was. You kept Kenneth Walker in your lineup with 0 fantasy points. Kenneth Walker had been out, I believe, since Friday. This should have been changed. You automatically win the game off your bench because you either would have started Jaylen Warren with 8. You would have started Chuba Hubbard, who got 11. That makes the difference in this game. So this loss is not really a 1-point spread. It's a Zestmeisters coaching fault, unfortunately. So this one's going to haunt the Zestmeisters for leaving Kenneth Walker in. Even though Kirk Cousins charged down the field and made it a 1-point game right at the end, it makes all the difference not having Kenneth Walker in your lineup. So Zestmeisters kind of sell themselves in week 2, and the Avengers are lucky to be 0-2. We move on to our next matchup, really one of the best matchups of the week. It was the Iguanas taking on the Guantanamo Bay Flying Squirrels, and this one was a high-scoring affair, 165 to 154. The Iguanas come away with a big victory over the now 0-2 Guantanamo Bay Flying Squirrels. So what went wrong for the Flying Squirrels? Well, I can tell you it wasn't the running back. One, at least. Top scorer of the week, Alvin Kamara, 44 fantasy points. The Saints are looking dominant as they destroy the Cowboys. And Alvin Kamara, as he always does, has like a 40-point game. This week, it's in week 2. And boy, was it crucial for the Guantanamo Bay Flying Squirrels to kind of stick around in this one. Joe Burrow contributed with 17. Zamir White continues to just be terrible. 6 fantasy points. Diggs and Hill, the 2 top receiving core for this team, were terrible. 7 points for Diggs, 6 for Tyreek Hill. Chris Godwin was a bright spot with 24 fantasy points, and the Chargers defense and Justin Tucker contributed 11 and 12. The big misses off the bench, 20 points for Rashid Shaheed, who continues to look like a cheat code, and Derek Carr with 21. So we'll see how many more Saints players slide into the lineup this week for the Guantanamo Bay Flying Squirrels. Or, for me, a surprising 0-2. On the other side of things, the Ithaca Iguanas, Jalen Hurts, 23 fantasy points, 19 points from James Conner, J.K. Dobbins added 20, and then the receiving core finally shown through. CeeDee Lamb, 19, Amon-Ra St. Brown, 22. How about Brock Bowers, 18 fantasy points? Brandon Ayuk was really the disappointment this week with 8 fantasy points. And on the other side of things, misses off the bench. Technically, David Montgomery was 17, but overall still came away with a huge scoring victory. And to improve to 2-0, Iguanas might be a real problem this season. Now we move on to what I teamed the game of the week. And it didn't really live up to the hype. It was a absolute stomping, blowout victory for the Brisbane Bay Bandicoots, who improved to 1-1 and defeat the Rocky River Rough Riders, who fall to 1-1, 176-95. So our lowest scoring game or team and our highest scoring team of the season so far. It was just domination. Kyler Murray, 28 fantasy points for the Bandicoots, 26 from Adams, 28 from Malik Neighbors, who, I'll give him his flowers, actually looked good. Daniel Jones got him the football. Respect to Malik Neighbors. He's proved me something. Daniel Jones, though, has not. Everybody else was in the teens except for Jamar Chase with 7, Isaiah Likely with 4. So is Isaiah Likely tight end 1? I still have question marks. And Jamar Chase was just really disappointing against the Chiefs. Does he lose points for a penalty? Maybe he should for that. A lot of problems. But Jackson Smith and Jigbo was the big miss off the bench. 23 fantasy points. He's looked good for Seattle. On the other side, what went wrong for the Rocky River Rough Riders? Well, pretty much everything. Everybody scored under 10 except 3 players. Devontae Smith, Drake London, and Harrison Butker. Your quarterbacks were terribly disappointing with 9 from Anthony Richardson and 9 from Josh Allen. 3 points from Rashid Shaheed, and your newly acquired running back in Joe Mixon only got you 8 and an injury. So we'll have to monitor that. Big misses off the bench was anybody that went over 10. Gardner Minshew, the Bengals defense, and Javonte Williams. So really a rough week for the Rocky River Rough Riders, who will look to bounce back next week. 2 more matchups to go, and the next one really played real close. It was a really quality game. Bay City Bunnies taking on the Empire Strikes Back, and in a 6-point victory, the Bay City Bunnies improved to 2-0. After a 146-140 victory over the Empire Strikes Back, who have to be a shock to start 0-2 for me. I am just very surprised by that result. If you will, kind of the Florida States of college football right now for the Empire Strikes Back. And the Bay City Bunnies become one of those Cinderella stories. Think of 2022 TCU. But Bay City right now, they played well. They got 20 points from Kami Fairburn, 24 from Kelvin Ridley, and 22 for Zay Flowers. Think about that. No A.J. Brown, no problem. The 2 receivers he throws in completely make up for no A.J. Brown. And Derrick Henry got you 16. Disappointments for the week, Matt Stafford with 6, Aaron Jones with 9, and Sam Laporta continues to struggle, only 3 for him. Big misses off the bench. I'm going to say there are none. There are no big misses off the bench. On the other side of things, the Empire Strikes Back. What went well? Well, Jay Jettis, 23 fantasy points. A quad strain, I believe. He left the game. We assume he's going to be all right. I don't see a designation under the name, so he should be fine. But continue to monitor that. He got 18 from Baker Mayfield, who's looking like a true quarterback 1. Saquon Barkley scored 17, 18 from Rashee Rice, and 11 from the Jets defense. Disappointing-wise, your punter got 0, Tress Way. Jared Goff got you 8 and 7 points from Dalton Kincaid. No really big misses off the bench, so you made clear there, but an 0-2 start for the Empire. Let's see how they try to bounce back. And the Bay City Bunnies, can they continue this dominant run so far? The final matchup of the week In a 1-point spread, like I called, in a 1-point victory, the Bowling Green Cave Shrimp come away with a huge come-from-behind victory over the Grand Rapids Groundhogs. Let me tell you, everything looked bleak. Everything looked terrible. We'll start with the Groundhogs because Thursday night football, Devon A. Chan and James Cook each scored 29 and 28 respectfully. So there's already about 60 fantasy points that the Bowling Green Cave Shrimp have to try to overcome, and they somehow did it. Marvin Harrison Jr. shown out for the Groundhogs, scoring 29 fantasy points in the first half, which was crazy. Didn't do anything in the second half. And everybody else struggled. Travis Kelce, what are we doing? He scored 1 fantasy point. Is Travis Kelce washed at this point? I'm trying to figure it out because Patrick Mahomes barely looks his way. Cooper Kupp got injured, so that's 2 Rams receivers now going to the IR and hurt. He only managed 7. Michael Pittman managed 5. Tua, we hope he's okay, managed 5. And Jaden Daniels couldn't find the end zone, but still got 13. Big misses off the bench, 19 from Sam Darnold, 17 from Ramondre Stevenson. So with a deficit to overcome, the Bowling Green Cave Shrimp did it. It was on the back of a Deebo Samuel and Trey McBride 18-point game, 15 from Jonathan Taylor, 13 from Josh Jacobs, 16 from Isaiah Pacheco, but we lose Isaiah Pacheco on the IR. Deebo Samuel is set to miss a couple weeks. So this Cave Shrimp has to overcome some adversity. I also want to point out, Garrett Wilson struggled with 10. Is Aaron Rodgers going to throw him the football? We don't really know. Brock Purdy and Dak Prescott continue to be mid. 12 points for Dak, 13 for Brock Purdy. Also want to point out my running backs score. Jonathan Taylor rushed for 100 yards or over 100 yards. Josh Jacobs rushed for like 130. Neither of them got into the end zone. So, some things to monitor for the Cave Shrimp moving forward. Big misses off the bench. Probably 14 from J-Mo is the biggest miss there. So, that takes you through the week 2 recap. Cave Shrimp get a victory. Bay City Bunnies, the Bandicoots, the Iguanas, and the Avengers all are winners this week. They'll look to continue their winning ways, while some of these teams that fell this week will look to get back on track or get their first win in general. Some hungry teams out there, but let's swing to my week 3 predictions. Week 3 predictions, here we go, and we start with the Zestmeisters taking on the Groundhogs. Should be a fun game. An 0-2 Zestmeisters team, which at their own fault right now is 0-2, where the Groundhogs are 1-1. So the Groundhogs looking to bounce back after a tight loss to the Bowling Green Cave Shrimp. This week, I think there's some solid performances for the Zestmeisters. I think Lamar has a good game. Jordan Mason plays well. Nico Collins plays well. Kenneth Walker plays fine if he plays. Monitor that. I think George Kittle and Nico Collins continue to take steps forward. George Kittle specifically because no Debo. But your turning point player, George Pickens, I think he plays fine against the Chargers this week. I just think the Steelers need to continue to make sure he gets the football, because when they give him the football, good things happen. On the other side for the Groundhogs, I think the matchups become a little bit more difficult. I think Devon Achane and James Cook continue to move forward and have solid games. Marvin Harrison seems to have found his stride after a solid week 2. I think he continues that forward against Detroit this week. And then we get to your 2 turning point players. That's right, you get 2 because you're starting Tyler Johnson for the Rams, who obviously is going to need to step up with no Puka Nacua or Cooper Kupp. Against the 49ers, don't love the matchup, don't really know much about him. So because of that, I think he has, I don't even know how to score him really. On the other side of things, it's Travis Kelce. What are we doing, Travis? This is a guy that was rated the number 1 tight end. He has not looked anywhere near it. He's got to get his head in the game right now, because Travis Kelce has been one of the, if not the most disappointing fantasy football player in the league. So Travis Kelce, you're a turning point player. Do I think he plays well? I don't really feel confident scoring him high. So no. But I think in a 10-plus point spread, give me the Zestmeisters. I saw what they did last week against the Avengers. They're one good roster move away from beating the Michigan Avengers. I think the Groundhogs have more tough matchups, and because of that, they score low this week. I think, the injury to Cooper Kupp kind of hurts this prediction. Give me the Zestmeisters to upset the Grand Rapids Groundhogs and improve to 1-2 in a 10-plus point spread. And the absence of Michael Pittman from the Groundhogs, I'm still confident in Michael Pittman scoring more than Tyler Johnson, if I'm being honest. But Sam Darnold, I also would like to point out, slides in for the Groundhogs. He's been really good. Let's see if he can continue that against a tough Houston Texans team. Looking over to the next matchup, it's Iguanas taking on the Bandicoots in what I think should be a really, really fun matchup. I think this one's going to be really close. The 2-0 Iguanas taking on a Bandicoots team that just scored the highest fantasy points. These are two teams that scored a lot of fantasy points last week. But looking at the matchup, I think the Iguanas get a really solid week from Jalen Hurts. They get a really solid week from Deshaun Watson just because he plays the New York Giants. James Connors and David Montgomery playing each other, but I still think they both produce pretty well. And then the wide receivers continue to perform well. CeeDee Lamb has an outstanding game against Baltimore. Among us, St. Brown torches a really bad Arizona defense. Brock Bowers has a great game against Carolina. And then that brings me to your turning point player, Brandon Ayuk. Now, Ayuk has everything set up for him. Obviously, he's got to deal with the 49ers wanting to run the ball a little bit more with Jordan Mason, but he's only got to compete with George Kittle. I see no reason why Brandon Ayuk shouldn't be taking all of the Deebo Samuel production. So give me Brandon Ayuk, your turning point player, to have a really solid week without Deebo in the lineup. On the other side for the Bandicoots, I think Kyler Murray continues to push forward, have another solid game against the Lions. Bijan Robinson thrives against the Kansas City Chiefs. Kyron Williams, I think on the flip side, has a down week against the 49ers defense. Just tough with that front, but I do think he might slip into the end zone. Your wide receivers, Jamar Chase, newly acquired, has a really solid bounce back week after a disappointing week last week against KC. And Devontae Adams pushes forward with another solid week against an awful Carolina team. I think Isaiah Likely, your turning point player, has a poor week. I just don't think he's the tight end one. I think they've just slowly introduced Mark Andrews in. I think he has a poor week against Dallas, so he's your turning point player. Malik Neighbors won't be your turning point player, but I think he regresses back to mid because he is playing the Cleveland Browns. But in a 8-point spread, in a big scoring game, give me the Ithaca Iguanas. I think they're going to be a problem all season long. I think they improved to 3-0 after a monster week this week over the Brisbane Bay Bandicoots. So now we move on. 3 more matchups ahead. We'll go to our next matchup. It's the Flying Squirrels taking on the Empire. 2 0-2 teams. One is going to get in the win column. The other is going to start to hit the panic button. 0-3, not a spot you want to be. But we'll go through the lineups. We'll start with the Empire. Jared Goff, Baker Mayfield. I think Baker Mayfield performs the better out of the two, but I think they're both serviceable. Baker Mayfield playing Denver this week. I think a 20-plus point game for the Bake Show again. We look at the running backs. I think Barkley and Etienne play solid. Jefferson, as long as he's healthy, playing well, he's going to be flirting with 20 points this week, especially against the Texans. Rashee Rice continues to dominate. Your turning point player, Dalton Kincaid. I think Dalton Kincaid plays better than he has. He's been hovering around the 6 to 8 range. I think Dalton Kincaid maybe gets into the end zone against New England, has a better game for the Bills. So your turning point player, I see going in a good direction. On the other side for the Flying Squirrels, Joe Burrow probably has a solid game. Alvin Kamara plays really solid. Your turning point player, Derek Carr, he's going to slide in for the first time. I know the Saints have been really good. They play the Eagles this week. I think we might shine through and see the true Saints. I don't know. I feel like they're not as good as that record shows and how dominant they beat the Cowboys. I just think the Cowboys aren't as good as we think they are. So I think Derek Carr regresses back to average Derek Carr. Other things to note, I think Hill has a bounce-back game. Diggs has a fine game against his original former team, the Minnesota Vikings. And I think Chris Godwin at your flex position has another solid week. Baker to Godwin continues to be a really solid connection, but in a 10-plus point spread. It's still a big difference. Give me the Empire Strikes Back to defeat the Guantanamo Bay Flying Squirrels in a 10-plus point spread. I just think the Empire have more weapons and more positive production this week than the Flying Squirrels, who Zamir White's going to let you down. I think Dallas Goedert's going to have an unfortunate game. And then Derek Carr, as mentioned. So, 3 matchups down, 2 to go. We get to the Bowling Green Cave Shrimp taking on the Rocky River Rough Riders. The Rough Riders just got stomped by the Bandicoots, and the Cave Shrimp narrowly escaped the Grand Rapids Groundhogs. So, let's go through those matchups. The Cave Shrimp, I think Brock Purdy finally has that elevated game we've been looking for. Dak Prescott continues to play mid, and I think we will continue to question why we drafted him. But I think Jonathan Taylor, Josh Jacobs both step up. The Green Bay Packers, without Jordan Love, we've clearly seen they're going to run the football. I think Josh Jacobs finally gets into the end zone for the Packers. I think he's flirting with 20 points this week, and I think the same thing's to be said about Jonathan Taylor. He's flirting with 20 points. I think he has a really solid game this week. And yeah, I think some good things ahead as they play Chicago for Jonathan Taylor. Garrett Wilson finally breaks out here on Thursday Night Football, taking on the New England Patriots. I think Aaron Rodgers finally gets him the football. On the other side, Jameson Williams has to slide in for Deebo Samuel. He'll play fine. J-Mo will play fine. Trey McBride plays fine. And then Keenan Allen, my turning point player, has to slide in for Isaiah Pacheco. And if he's healthy, Keenan Allen's been nursing an injury, didn't play last week. He got 11 targets in game 1. He only caught 4 of them because Caleb Williams and the offensive coordinator for the Bears is, But Keenan Allen, I think, plays serviceable. He'll play serviceable as long as he plays. Looking at the Rough Riders, I think Anthony Richardson has a bounce-back game against Chicago. Josh Allen dominates the Jaguars. He's in the 20-plus point range again. Rashid White and Joe Mixon, as long as Mixon is healthy, plays well on both sides, very serviceable. And then your turning point player, Devontae Smith, with A.J. Brown continuing to be doubtful for week 3. Give me Devontae Smith to play very well this week for the Eagles as your turning point player. Xavier Worthy and Schultz play fine. I think Drake London plays fine, but in a 5-point spread, give me the Bowling Green Cave Shrimp. I think the Cave Shrimp just have enough going for him in the running back room and with Garrett Wilson to overcome the quarterback duo of Anthony Richardson and Josh Allen. With Joe Mixon and Devontae Smith, though, making things interesting and super close. So, 4 matchups in the books. Here is matchup number 5, and it is the game of the week. It's 2-0 teams, the Michigan Avengers taking on the Bay City Bunnies in a great matchup. I think both sides have a lot of talent coming in, but let's kind of walk you through things. Patrick Mahomes has really been question marked, but I think he finally has a really, really good game against the Atlanta Falcons. Aaron Rodgers is a new addition for the Avengers. I think he slides in and plays fine against the New England Patriots. Your running back room plays excellent. Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be flirting with 20 points. And the top scorer of the week, Breece Hall, taking on the New England Patriots. I think he has a monster game. We're talking near 30 points, maybe more. I think that is the top scorer of the week. That's going to be a big boost for the Avengers. Mike Evans and Metcalf play serviceable, and your turning point player, Mark Andrews. I don't think he does excellent. I think he improves. He continues to improve, but by no means a quality game like you drafted him for. But that's your turning point player. But I think Breece Hall makes up for it in a lot of ways with how many points I think he's going to score this week. On the flip side, the Bunnies now trying to contend with Breece Hall. C.J. Stroud plays well. Stafford, not so much. Derrick Henry and Aaron Jones, serviceable, but they have tough matchups this week. Calvin Ridley and Zay Flowers continue to play quite well, actually. I've got them playing pretty well at an elevated level. And then your turning point player, Sam Laporta, the number 2 tight end off the board. The most disappointing players this season have been the tight ends. Between Travis Kelce and Sam Laporta, I can't tell you who's more disappointing. They both have not scored over 10 fantasy points. They both have been terrible, but this week, I think Sam Laporta turns it around against the Cardinals. He'll get into the end zone, and Sam Laporta will start to move forward back on track. Tony Pollard will play serviceable, and I think Tommy Fairburn and Brandon Aubrey, it's a fun matchup to watch. 2 kickers that have both scored near 20 each week. Will they do it again? We'll find out. But in an 8-point spread. Yeah, that's right. The game of the week has an 8-point spread. Give me the Michigan Avengers because of Breece Hall's monster game he's about to have. I think it's very good. I think if the Bunnies are very competitive, they play a winning game pretty much against anybody else. But because of Breece Hall, the Michigan Avengers walk away with this one in an 8-point spread over the Bunnies, who will take their first loss. And the Avengers will be one of the lone 3-0 teams with the Iguanas this week. So that'll do it for our prediction video this week. Cave Shrimp, Empire, Avengers, Iguanas, Zestmeisters, my 5 teams to win this week. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Did your team get hit pretty bad by the injury bug, or are you doing all right? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you next week to recap week 3 and get you my week 4 predictions here on the Nathan Sports Talks channel.